Good.
It's so nice over here. There's something called um, Havarium, which we have in Toronto as well. Last night at 2 o'clock in the morning, we were on their way over to bring us a generator. And on their way over, the power turned back on because we didn't need to. But it's amazing they have here at 2 o'clock in the morning. Somebody was actually coming ready to set up a generator here. Okay, so I'm not sure where Avram left off
Oh,
yesterday.
he got all the way to the bottom of Amud Aleph of
Samachvav?
Samach Vav. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect, because that's really one long sugya. So
Yeah.
I assume then that he got all the way to Vidogim, Kol Sheyesh Leisnap Revikatzet.
I think he got to Tana Rabbanan right at the.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly where we are. Okay,
Yeah.
that's where I got it
Yeah,
the
yeah,
last
yeah,
time as well.
yeah. Duggan. Yeah, yeah. You're right. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we finished the insect yesterday, and today we're starting with the fish. Dr. Helig Gemara. Uvedogim, Uvedogim, Kol Sheyesh Leisnap Revikatzet. If it has fins and scales, it's kosher. Tanur Rabban. What about Ein Lo Achshav? But the Osid Lagadel Bachesman. It doesn't have scales or fins right when it's born, but it will eventually have them. Kegoin Hasultanis, the Ha'afia, which Rashi says are species of small fish. And Rashi says they're called tunina. I can't believe that's tuna, because tuna is a very large fish. Areza mutter. Yesh lo achshuv, the otid la shiran, the chats, she'olim in hamayim. What if this is a fish that has scale? And when the fish is removed from the water, it loses its scales. Kagayan, there's a series of fish that have this characteristic, turning onto Amud Beis. Akunis, Viafunis, Caspisias, Va'achas Petias, Viatunis, Harezemut. All those are kosher fish because they have, at one point, they have the scales. And on Hashem, we learned in the Mishnah. Kol sheyesh like kaskeset, yesh lo snapper. Any fish that has scales, we know for sure that it has to have fins as well. However, yesh lo snapper, there are fish that do have fins that in like kaskeset but don't have scales. So yesh lo kaskeset, yesh lo snapper. If it has scales and fins, dak tahar. That's a dak tahar. Yesh lo snapper, ben like kaskeset, but if it has fins but not scale, dak tahar. So at the bottom line is you need scale. Fins have no impact. So correct Gemara, if that's the case, michti, akaskeset kosam shina. It's the scale that tipped the scale. Lichtoi rachmana kaskeset. So all the Torah should have told us is that the fish needs to have scale. Maloi lichtoi snapir. And it should never have written snapir. Zok to Gemara, because of rachmana kaskeset, maloi kosam snapir, I wouldn't have known how to define what kaskeset means. And then I would say, because of Rechmana Kaskets, really because it's not there, Avamina, my Kaskets is not there. I would have thought that the definition of Kaskets are fin. So therefore, so therefore, I would have thought Vafilu Dag Tame, which would mean if I would mistakenly think that all you need are fins, we would mistakenly allow even a Dag Tame to be eaten that does not have scales. Because of Rachman is snapper, Vikaskes, the Torah writes both. Now that the Torah writes both, it has to mean both things have scales. But correct Gemara, the Hashda the cause of Rahman is snapper Vikaskes. The Torah wrote snapper Vikaskes. We touch Kaskes. The Mishnah clearly touches Kaskes as scale, and snapper as fin. How does the Mishnah know how to define the two? The Mishnah should just say, since it says both, you need both. Like the Hashda the cause of Rahman is snapper Vikaskes. Mimai the Kaskes Revushavu. How do we know that the scale is a body armor? Because we have a puzzle. The puzzle says, Shiryon Kaskat and Pulovish. He was wearing a, a bodysuit made out of scale. I believe that was by Goliath, I think. Yeah, I believe that was when David approached Goliath. He was wearing a full body of armor of scale. So we have a pasuk in Novi that tells us that Keskeskas are scale. So Frank to Gemara, if that's the case, then we're back to square one. The lichtay v'rachmana Keskesas, below lichtay snapir. So maybe you should take Keskesas and not snapir. And I already know that Keskesas means scale, and that's really the most important item that signifies, that indicates the bird is kosher, that the fish is kosher. Amar Bavo, Chain Tan, the very Shmuel, Yagdil Torah v'Yad. What does Yagdil Torah v'Yadir mean? Rashi does not say, but Tosfos says, Yagdil Torah v'Yadir, Harbe Omar Lonu Tainim, Leda Ma'hu Kaskesas. The Torah wants to be extra clear. Yes, we could have looked into Navi. We could have referenced Navi to determine what Kaskesas means, even if the Torah only said Kaskesas. But the Torah wanted to provide us an overabundance of clarity by saying both snapper and Kaskesas, which would leave no room for any doubt that the fish needs both fins and scales. Now, it's very interesting to note, if in fact scales is what tips the scale, and the fins are not necessary, and the Torah only mentions fins, so that we should know for sure that you require scales, it's a little bit shmerlach over here. So someone said over, the article brings down from somebody, there's a famous shaila. When you have simoni kashrus of an animal, so by fish, fins and scale, is it merely a simon? The reason why this fish happens to be much to eat is hidden from us. The Torah is telling us, how will you be able to figure out which species of fish are allowed and which ones aren't? I'm giving you a sign. So is it merely a simon? Or is it a siva? Or do you say that what makes the fish kosher is the fact that it has the fins and scale? So it's not just a way for us to recognize what fish is kosher and what not, but that's actually what makes it kosher. If that's the case, then it's very partial why the Torah should say both snapper and kaskesses, because that's what my was mashri. If the Torah is just trying to give us a stimin, so the kaskesses alone would have been a good stimin, so the Gemara had to answer Yaakov Torah v'yadik. But if it's a sipa, then it makes sense why the Torah would write the full reasoning why the fish is kosher. Now, I wouldn't know how that sipa works, but whatever the case is, this shaila is brought up by mammals as well, where with hooves and chewing cud, is that a reason why in and of itself it should be kosher, or is that merely a sin? Because up the hill of Gemara by there. Tanarabban, Mimashma Shenemar, Echoil, Es Shieshloi. Now there's a lot of psukim, a little bit of redundancy in the fins and the scales. So let's look at the psukim. It says, "As that toichlu mikol asher b'mayim, kol asher loi snapper b'kaskes." So that's one place. What should you eat from the creatures in the water? Anything that is snapper b'kaskes, b'yamim b'mayim, b'yamim u'b'cholim, oitom toichim. That's one possible. But there's another possible that says, "B'chol asher ein loi snapper b'kaskes." So we have one possible telling you eat what has fins and scales. We have another possible that says don't eat that which don't have fins and scales. So Dr. Gemara, the possible that tells you to eat those fish that have fins and scales. Well, then Shemei al toichel eshein. So by process of Mechlalavat Shmei Hain, I can figure out on my own not to eat the other species. Mimashma shenemar al toichel eshe eloi. And if I have a pasuk that says don't eat fish that don't have fin and scales, well then shemeyani I can figure out on my own echoil eshe yeshlei that I am allowed to eat those that do have fins and scales. So I batoi the lama sham. Why did the Torah repeat the simanim of a kosher fish, psi in the positive and psi in the negative? Gemara laver alav basei v'loisa. It must be because the Torah wanted to be over both in the say and the loisa say if we eat a non-kosher fish. The Torah that says eat fish with fins and scales, and we're medai from there, don't eat fish without fins and scales. So we say it's a say, it's a loisa say mechalala say. The Torah doesn't say the loisa say that we're medai from that say. So a loisa say abba mechalala say has the potency of an assay. But then you have another passage that says, do not eat that. That is not a snapper because that's a real license. So we have two licenses. One's a license in the Chalala and one's an actual license. The license in the Chalala is like it's categorized in the say, you don't come out. So we have a stable license.
Oh, can't hear you. You're frozen.
Must have frozen for a minute.
Oh yeah. Oh, I was just going to give you
Is
a
it better?
message. Yeah, I
Is it
hear you
better?
now. Oh yeah,
So
now
my
I hear you.
internet's not okay. My internet's not is not so good right now. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very well. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Okay, excellent. Yeah, if it gets fuzzy, then let me know. It just
Yeah,
means
I
that
was just going to send you a message, but
uh,
you came
okay,
back before I
perfect.
did. Yeah,
So
what
what's
does
the
it mean?
last
What
thing
does
that
it
you heard?
mean that if you don't like fish, you should eat kosher fish anyways?
No, I don't think it's an say to eat fish. It's an say not to eat
Because
non-kosher
it's a
fish.
mitzvah to eat it?
I don't think it's a mitzvah for you is to eat fish. I just think it means that if you're going to eat fish, this is what you shall eat and not others, unless it's on Shabbat. But that's not what this pasuk is talking about. So the pasuk says, "As zeh toichlu mikol asher b'may," and the Gemara darshan toichlu mikol asher b'may. Now, we need a little bit of introduction because otherwise this Gemara can get complicated. There's three types of bodies of water. There's moving water, like rivers where and springs, or the water is moving. Then we have bodies of water that are stagnant, like puddles and pits and boiros. And then we have a third type of water that's in a keli. And the Gemara is going to discuss the prohibition of eating a tamayim, meaning any fish that doesn't have fins and scales, in these different types of waters. Because if you look in the pasuk, it says the following items you're allowed to eat from things that are in the water. Kol asher lo snaper b'kaskeses b'mayim b'yamim u'v'nchol. So it's mashma that the only place where you must only eat fish with fins and scales are in running water. But what if I found a fish without fins and scales, but it wasn't in Yamim, Necholim, or Mayim? It was in a bar, or it was in a keli. Then it's mashma that I actually would be allowed to eat it. So the rules that govern which fish I'm allowed to eat seem only to apply in these types of bodies of water. But in a bar, a stagnant body of water, or a keli, which is not even in the ground, it's mashma that there you can eat whatever you want. That's what the Gemara is going to be discussing. The Zok to Gemara. Toichlu mikol asher b'mayim. Ma tamad loymar. Why did the Torah tell us the? Why did the Torah tell us a redundant tivui? Because let's look again at this passage. As that toichlu mikol asher b'mayim, kol asher lo isnaber b'kaskeses b'mayim b'yamu v'necholim. and it could stop there. The pasuk continues and says, Oisam Techelu. So Oisam Techelu is really redundant. But the Gemara, due to the drasha that it's going to be making, tells us that the Oisam Techelu is the main pasuk. But once it says Oisam Techelu, then Ezet Techelu at the beginning of the pasuk is no longer necessary. Now, one of these two are extra, either Ezet Techelu at the beginning of the pasuk, or Oisam Techelu at the end of the pasuk. Now, although normal logic dictates the first time the pasuk mentions it is the base case that's needed, and the one to darshan would be the extra one, here, due to the nature of the drasha that the Gemara is going to make, it could only possibly make the drasha from the Ezet title at the beginning of the pasuk. Therefore, the Gemara frames the question the opposite of how we would expect it to. The Gemara says, if it says already Oisham Teichelu in the Seif of the pasuk at the end of the pasuk, why did it repeat Ezet Teichelu at the beginning of the pasuk? Ma Tamad Leimer. Zok to Gemara, I'll tell you why it says Sheyoko. I might have thought Koil the hitter b'mefurish. There's a place where the Torah is matir something mefurish. So the Torah was matir. The Torah was matir fish without the proper simon. The Torah was matir fish without the proper simon b'mefurish in an explicit fashion. The hitter is down, and the Torah was matir fish without thinking scale in a more subtle fashion. Now, where the Torah specifically asers is matter these fish in a explicit fashion and a subtle fashion, we're going to get to tomorrow. But for today, suffice it to say that there's two places where the Torah was matter fish that don't have fins and scale. One was in a more explicit place, and one was in a more subtle. And we want to compare the two. Just like where the Torah explicitly teaches us that you don't have to limit yourself to fish that have fins and scale. You're allowed to eat any type of fish if it was in kalim. So you had a keli with water in it, and it generated worms. Worms grew out of that water, and now there's worms in the water. The Torah tells us you're allowed to drink that water with the worms inside. So too, when we find another puzzle that subtly indicates that you could drink shrotin, lahiter elabakeh, it's only allowed in kalim. But if it was in yamin and the harais, there, of course, fish would have to have simanim to be able to eat. Dr. Gemara, minayin l'rabbis boyros shichanim ma'arais. How do we know? We know for sure if the worms get generated with the waters and the keli, there it's mutter. We know shrotim that are found in running water. We know are for sure usher unless they have things in scales. What about the middle area where it's in the ground but it's in a stagnant place, like boyers shichanim, which are standing bodies of water? How do you know sheshoicha? You're allowed to drink from that water, the ene nimna, and you don't have to refrain from drinking the water, even though you might suck up while you're drinking shrotim. Now, this is an important point to note that it's only mutter if you're drinking from the water and the shrotim come into your mouth. That's where it will be mutter. But to actually take a shirt out of the water and eat it, that would not be allowed. So, minayin l'rabbis boris shichlum arish and the shoyce in my hand that you could actually drink straight from the bottle. The eini nimna, and you don't have to refrain from drinking, even though there's going to be a sheretz hamayim without fins and scales. Talmud Loimer, toichlu mikol asher b'mayim. That's the pasuk that we just darshan. It says, "Instead toichlu mikol asher b'mayim." We learn from there that you're allowed to drink from water, even if it has shrotim in it, if it's standing water. So we started off this little statement by saying that if shrotim are found in kalim, you're allowed to drink that water without removing those shrotim. Where did the Torah teach us this? It says in our prophet, "Ezeh toichlu mikol asher b'moyim." Then the Torah goes on and says, "Kol asher yesh leisnaper v'kaskeset b'mayim v'yamim u'v'necholim." So we darshan as follows: "Toichlu mikol asher b'moyim heichen hitter b'kelim." Chsiv ezeh toichlu mikol asher b'moyim, and then it speaks out v'yamim u'v'necholim. Dafka, where do we have all our restrictions? The pasuk tells us the yamim u'v'necholim. Who the islay, if it has fins and scales, echoil, eat that fish. The less lay, if it doesn't have fins and scales, loisecho, don't eat that fish. Dafka, if the fish are found by yamim u'v'necholim, hobekalim. But if the fish are found in kalim, in a different type of body of water, the less lay, even if it doesn't have fins and scales, echoil, eat it. Now, Dr. Gemara, maybe you should look at the pasuk from the opposite perspective. You're looking at the pasuk from the perspective of Isser. You're saying, if that pasuk calls Shebamayim, what requires snapper because says, doctor those that are found by Yamim Uvanachol. Maybe look at it from the exact opposite perspective. This pasuk is saying, what fish are you allowed to eat? That is our snapper because maybe that means even in a body of running water, you're only allowed to eat fish that have fins and scales. But in a keli, maybe you're not allowed to eat fish at all, even if it does have fins and scales. But who said we should apply the limit to the Isser and say it's only author to eat fish without fins and scales? If it's b'yamim u'v'necholim, but if it's in a keli, you are allowed to eat that fish. Maybe it's mukmaker. The only time snapper v'kaskeset allows you to eat a fish is b'yamim u'v'necholim. But in a keli, even with snapper v'kaskeset, the fish would still be awesome. That's what Gemara asks. How do you know to analyze the pasuk to limit the Isser? Maybe dash the pasuk to limit the heter, which would be more logical because the Torah is actually talking as that talking about a heter. So Dr. Gemara, maybe heichen hitter bekalim the chsiv has said toichlu mikol asher b'moyim b'yamim u'nechalim. Who did he is le'achoil the left le'achoil habekalim apagam the left le'achoil. Dr. Gemara, who said look at it from that perspective? Ema the opposite. Bekalim apagam the is le'achoil. Maybe the Torah is telling you that the whole heter of eating a fish that's not a v'kaskefet is only if you find it in running water. But if you found it in kalim, you're not allowed to eat it at all. Dr. Gemara. It's not mistaber to dash in the pasuk to limit the heter. It makes more sense to dash in the pasuk to limit the issue. Why? Because of another pasuk. Let's look at the other pasuk that talks about sins and scales. It says, "V'chol asher ein lod naper v'katkesef v'yamim u'v'necholim mikol sheret hamayim mikol nefesh chaya asher b'mayim sheket him." Here the Torah is talking about Isser. Anything that doesn't have snabba v'kaskesef, if it's found in the Yamim u'v'necholim, then it's going to be off. Mashma, if you found that same fish not in Yamim u'v'necholim, even though it didn't have snabba v'kaskesef, it will still be allowed to be eaten. So let's have a look inside the Gemara. Dr. Gemara, Ema b'kelim afagav the istay loisech. Dr. Gemara lois lokadai. The chsiv the cholacher ain't lois snabba v'kaskesef. The pasuk that's talking about Isser says it's only by Yamim u'v'necholim v'kol sheret hamayim. So we say by Yamim u'v'necholim unless the loisech. The whole prohibition to eat a fish without fins and scales is only if it's found by Yamim u'v'necholim. Habakalim. If you found the fish in a keli, in a vessel, apagav the left lay, even if it doesn't have fins and scales, echol you're allowed. So that's how we know. That's how we know that the prohibition to eat fish without fins and scales only applies b'yamim v'necholim, does not apply in kalim. And we have a discussion now. What about if it's found the boyers b'sichim of the ma'aros? So let's see what the Gemara says. Ve'ema. Why don't we say you should darshan the pasuk? B'mayim is klal, v'yamim v'necholim is a prat, And klal prat ein bechlal l'mashav prat yomim unecholim in itim v'charitim loy. Why don't we say that we have a klal prat? Let's look at the part. It says that toichu mikol asher b'mayim at the klal. Kol asher loy naper v'kaskeses is a prat. So we have a klal and a prat, and when we say when there's a klal prat, ein bechlal l'mashav prat, and therefore the only time there's a prohibition to eat fish without fins and scales is only by Yamin Uvanachol, but not in any other body of water. The talk to Gemara, no, because we have another klal at the end. The Gemara, Chazar v'chol, the Mayim Chazar v'chol. It says Mayim a second time. So since it has says Mayim a second time, it's a klal, pratu klal. Therefore, not only are we prohibited from eating fish without fins and scales by Yamim Levanacholim, similar to the prat, it's also the Eaton and Charitin, which are ditches and puddles and boiros where there's standing water. That's also comparable to Yamim and Cholim because it's in the ground. And there as well, there will be a prohibition of eating fish that do not have fins and scales. So let's look at the pasuk inside to see where the two klolim are. It says, "V'chol asher ein lo snaper v'kaskeses by yamin." So there's the klal. Uvanachol. I'm sorry. It says, "V'chol asher ein lo snaper v'kaskeses by yamin uvanacholim." We call sheret hamayim. We call nefesh achaya asher b'mayim. So the two words b'mayim. One second. Yeah, so the two times that it says b'mayim, it says v'chol she'ein l'snaber v'kaskeset b'yamim v'necholim, mikol sheret hamayim, and mikol nefesh chaya shebamayim. So it says b'mayim twice. There's our two klal. So zok the Gemara, it says in the pasuk, b'mayim chazer v'kalal, you have two b'mayim. Correct? Remember, the problem is a klal prat. The klal means is a klal first, followed by another klal. In this pasuk, it says the prat first, and then there's two klolim. So it's not in the proper order. Correct? Gemara, hani pre kloli the smichi la'adadi. These two klolim are together, and they're preceded by the prat. You can't darshan a klal prat the klal with such a configuration. Ravina is the army of Marava, like they said in Marava. Whenever you find two klolis, that are one right beside the other, without a prat in between them, but there is a nearby prat, how should you process that? So tomorrow, you process it, let's turn on to Samach Zayin, Amar Aleph. Well, you process it as Hatal Prat name. Take the prat of the Yamu and Cholim, make believe it's in between the two klolim of Mayim, the doinam b'chlalu prat, and then you could treat it just like a regular prat klal. So therefore, you have b'mayim klal. Anywhere you find these types of fish is b'mayim, any type of water. But then there's a prat of b'yamin u'b'cholim prat. The only time you're governed by the rules of fish is b'yamin with running water. And then b'mayim, the second b'mayim is chazer v'klal. So let's darshan it klal prat klal i'atadon elokeinak prat. Ma prat, just like the prat mefurish mayim noitim, just like the prat which is yamim unecholim, which is flowing water. Akol mayi noitim. So too, all flowing water. My Rabbi, what is it? Including Charitin and U'itin, which also have flowing water in it, Li'isura. So the only fish that have to have fins and scales are fish that are found in Charitin, in the Itin, in the Cholim, and then Yamim. But if it's in a bar that's merely standing water, you're not governed by the halachas of Sher Tamayim, and even without pins and scale, you're allowed to eat it. Ma'amiyat, those bodies of water would not require any type of simonim to eat what's inside. Right to Gemara, who said that's how you darshan the klal prat to klal? The ema may be darshan it differently. Ma prat mifurish mayim gedalim al gabikar. Don't define the prat so narrowly. Define the prat broadly. Not that it's flowing water, but it's merely water that's on the ground. Ma prat mifurish mayim gedalim al gabikarka. Avkol mayim gedalim al gabikarka. Any body of water that's in the ground. Umay Rabbi, at that point, therefore, it would include that would include even bodies of water that are in the ground, but they're standing bodies of water. They will also be governed by the limitations of only eating fish that have fins and scales. And what would be excluded? Umay Rabbi, only mute kalim. Maybe I would think that only if you find worms in water that's in kalim, there it doesn't have to have fins and scales. But in any bar with standing water, you're still governed by the isurim of sher tamayim, and you're only allowed to eat those that have fins and scales. Dr. Gemara in King Toichlu Mayaham. Going back to our original pasuk, why do you need that Toichlu? That was extra because it already says Oishel Plechelu. So that Toichlu will tell you that in fact, even if the Sheret Tamayim was found in a standing body of water, that would also be mutter. So we're at the point now where the Gemara says the only time you're governed by the rules of Sheret Tamayim and you're only allowed to eat fish with fins and scales, that only applies if the fish are found in running water. But if it's found in a bar or in a keli, you're not governed by those rules, and you're allowed to eat fish even if they don't have fins and scales. Again, that's only if you're drinking it out of the water, you're not separating it. Because once you separate it and it's shared to al aretz, then it would be usher anyway. So let's stop here, and we'll pick up Bez Hashem tomorrow. Everyone should have an awesome day, and enjoy your fish. It's good that we do these halachas on a hot Sunday where you can go fishing. So you have to know that when you go fishing, you have to only take the fish that have fins and scales.
Okay, it's good to know. Thank you. Yes, Claire.
Go ahead. Thank you for all your nice wishes and the machzor. I very much appreciate it.
It'll all be well.
You have a wonderful day.